Welcome to post-Christian Europe, a land filled with beautiful monuments to an ancient religion that few Europeans practice anymore or know much about. While Christianity is still very relevant in the United States and is exploding in the developing world, Europe today has gone beyond unbelief and is now labeled Christophobic and anti-religious. While an American might look at a church building and think nice thoughts, that's rarely the case with a European, especially here in France, where religion is more likely to be associated with oppression, irrelevance, or simply the past. In France, as in much of Europe, only 5% go to church on a weekly basis, and most of them are the elderly. Only 10% think religion is very important. For all Europeans, that figure is only 21%. Journalist Richard Miniter.
As an American living in Europe, when you tell Europeans that you go to church on Sunday, they look at you like a museum piece, something strange.
Near Brussels, at Christian Center, an Assemblies of God church, Belgian pastor Paul de Vos ministers to a culture in which Christianity is largely irrelevant.
In the United States, people would more quickly turn toward at least Christ in general and Christianity because it's still somewhat part of the culture in general. Here in Europe, we have gone beyond that point, and we do not expect anything from religion, apart from some very abstract hope that there is something after this life.
And among the clergy in the state churches, unbelief is extraordinarily high. Baylor sociologist Rodney Stark.
It's easy to have a negative religious experience going to church in Europe. The one place where unbelief is rampant is in the churches.
The study Fragmented Faith found that in Britain, 1 out of 5 Anglican pastors do not believe in the bodily resurrection of Christ, and only 60% believe in the virgin birth. That's a lower level of belief than among churchgoers.
It's the churches they don't go to, and one of the reasons they don't go is that the people running them don't care if they don't go.
There have been news reports recently that although church attendance in Europe is low, belief in God is actually very high. But belief in what sort of God? Judging from surveys, it's a New Age faith, with a large dose of moral relativism. Vince Esterman, a Frenchman who grew up in Australia, has been a French pastor for almost 20 years and has a dynamic street ministry in Paris. And although he has led a lot of Frenchmen to Christ, he doesn't talk much about revival. He speaks of a Europe that is still moving away from God.
Europe that was the custodian of the gospel in the very early decades now is the continent that is rejecting the gospel and Christianity. And so we have seen France go into decline, and with it, Europe generally.
But instead of looking to faith for answers, the European media continue to mock America's high church attendance as weird. The British Economist magazine writes, "To Europeans, religion is the strangest and most disturbing feature about America."
So it's open season on evangelicals, in particular in France, but absolutely nothing can be said against Muslims, of course, because there's always retaliation.
Rodney Stark writes in The Victory of Reason that Europe owes everything to Christianity. Its culture, its freedom, its science, and its wealth. But European leaders today are defiant in their efforts to keep God and Christian faith out of public life. A sociologist at the Sorbonne in Paris says, "We are not going to sacrifice women's equality, democracy, and individual freedoms on the altar of a new religion." But some would say Europe has a new religion. Italy's culture minister Rocco Buttiglione, a devout Catholic, calls it a nihilistic fundamentalism against truth. Stark simply calls it hedonism and says it's why Europe is dying. No Western European country is having enough babies to replace its current population.
The loss of faith in Europe is like an unseen black star that still has a tremendous gravitational pull. They don't understand why their culture is failing. They don't understand why the divorce rates and suicide rates are so high. They don't understand why so few European women have more than one child, and why on most European streets you see more dogs than children. All this is an impact of the death of real Christian belief in Europe.
Europe today has been described as a majority of Christian atheists and a minority of Muslim fanatics. It's an exaggeration, but there is a spiritual void that Islam waits to fill. It was this void in the life of a Belgian woman, a former drug addict named Dagboek, that caused her to convert to Islam, go to Iraq, and blow herself up trying to kill U.S. troops.
I have been an eyewitness to France becoming increasingly Islamicized. There is no longer an ability to morally resist a strong culture like Islam coming into the country.
Europe is going to get more religious than it is, either because of a revival of Christianity or because they go Muslim. You can't sit there with no babies forever.
And because faith impacts everything from culture to economics to the war on terror, analysts say religious America and anti-religious Europe are likely to drift farther apart, unless or until Europe returns to God. Dale Hurd, CBN News, Paris.